Welcome back, guys. Welcome to the Cryptic Brush. I'm Kevin. I'll be your host today. So today I'm going to be actually going over a few different things. Hobby basics. I'm going to teach you guys how to dry brush, how to do some layering, as well as some highlighting, basting your minis, and even pinning, and also filing as well for the metal models and sometimes plastic models as well. So let's get to it. All right. So here we have a plastic sprue from Games Workshop, and these are some flat-sided clippers. Now these clippers, you want to make sure that on one side it's nice and flat, so when you put it up to the model, the flat side is touching the model itself. And what this does is it ensures that you have a nice clean cut. Once that's finished, you want to take a hobby knife or some type of scraper. In this case, I have an X-Acto knife. And you can get some extra blades from like Amazon. I got this like 2 years ago and I still have a ton left. Now what you want to do is you want to cut off the little nubs that you see from the sprue on the edges. Just like this, right there. The other thing you can do is you can also scrape. Make sure you always cut away from yourself too, otherwise you'll be like me and have scars on your thumbs. You want to look for mold lines. It's the tiny little lines that go along the model. You just want to scrape those off. They come off pretty easily. And there you go. That's how you clean a model. Now, same thing, but on a metal model, you want to make sure to look for those mold lines. And here I find one. And instead of using a knife, you can actually use a file. You can get these kits like Harbor Freight and all sorts of stuff. You can find like micro files. And you just want to gently file away the little areas. And you can see right there. There it goes. And it comes off really easily. I'm barely even pressing. And it just automatically goes away and becomes nice and smooth. And then you can prime from there. There you go. All done. Okay, so here we have the model primed and ready. So in this, I'm actually going to go over dry brushing. Here I have some a sheet of paper. And you can see I have a nice full brush that I'm going to be using for dry brush. In this case, we're going to do some groundwork, I want to say. I'm going to take some Xandri dust. And there we go. There's the Xandri dust. I'm going to get a little bit of paint onto my brush, and I'm actually going to wipe most of it off of the brush onto the paper towel. Like so. Now, the trick with this is you actually want to get most of the paint off on the brush as much as possible, and then lightly just catch the edges of the model. As you go over this, you'll see that the paint is starting to pick up on the outer edges. You just go around the model and just make sure you have nice coverage, picking up all the detail, and we'll go from there. Next up, I'm going to get some Shopti Bone, which is another color that's a little bit lighter than Xandri dust, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get a little bit of paint on the brush. I'm going to wipe most of it off on the paper towel, and then I'm going to go back over the model again. And what this should do is it should actually catch and make it a little bit more noticeable on all the upper ridges of the model. You can see here, it really is starting to make it pop, just with those two colors. Next up, I'm going to get some Agrax Earthshade. Now this is a Games Workshop wash that is very much a dark brown color, and it works really well for getting into all the little recesses and to make sure there's nice shading. And this is what washes are primarily used for, shading. So as you can see, got the Agrax Earthshade. I'm going to get a nice open brush, a full brush, so you can actually get a lot of the wash into the brush. And you want to make sure that not too much of this wash pools in multiple areas. You just want to make sure that it gets spread around evenly over the model so it can flow into all the little cracks and crevices. Now on this model in particular, what I'm doing, because he's on the ground, it's okay to actually have parts pool, because it's just going to add to the effect here. We'll come back to this later. But for now, as soon as I'm done with this, we're going to let it dry. Alright, now in this part, I'm going to teach you guys how to do highlighting. As you can see, I already got some paint, a much lighter shade put onto my little palette. I'm going to get some paint on my brush, not too much, just enough to work with. Forgive me, my brush is kind of cruddy at the moment. But as you can see, I'm actually not using the very tip of my brush, I'm using the side of my brush. And I'm just going along the edges, the very top edges of the model, and letting the edge catch the paint. And what this does is it helps actually bring out those edges to make it a little bit more noticeable, and it really makes the entire model pop. Now make sure you have a nice sharp brush, the bristles, when you do this. Otherwise you see, I don't know if you can see the little tips of my brush, but it's starting to part. That's actually something you don't really want, especially when you're doing fine detail work. It can kind of impede your progress, but I can work around this. Now as you can see, I'm just catching the top edges of the model around the little parts of the helmet here. And you want to work with what the light would catch. So if there's light shining on the model, you want to catch the areas where the light is going to catch those edges. And that's the whole point of having a highlight, is to catch the light on the edges. Now you can really get advanced when it comes to this, of exactly where you're placing your highlights and things like that. But for this moment, just what I'm doing here, I'm just kind of giving you a basic overview of how they are applied. I'll be going into more on how to do this a little bit on a better model and better brush later on. So yeah, as we used to say in the military, for instructional purposes only, this is how this works. Alright, so in this part, I'm going to teach you guys how to base. Now you could go with like a texture paint like this, Armageddon Dust by GW, or Games Workshop. And it's actually really easy. All you need is a little spatula type tool, like so. And you take it out of the pot and put it directly onto the model's base. Make sure you use the spatula to spread it around, and it has like little aggregate material in there, so when it dries it actually has a nice texture. Now you could prime it and dry brush over it, or you could leave it just as is. I generally still try to prime it because it locks in the material and make sure it doesn't flake off later on, and then just paint over it. But this is how you put the texture paint on. And once it dries, it actually dries pretty quickly. It only takes like 10-15 minutes to really be thoroughly dry, and then you can keep moving on. So you can do a lot of these in a very short amount of time. I always make sure to wipe off my my little spatula tool so it doesn't dry on there and get caked. Now for this other one, I'm going to show you a little bit more of an old school way. and this is the way that I still do it for myself. I use a nice hard tacky glue from Aleene's. It's a strong PVA glue. And what you do is you get yourself a little bit of glue, pour it out. I'm using the back of this magnet case thing that I'm not using anymore. Get some glue done up. Take an old brush that you're not using anymore because it does tend to damage the brush if you don't wash it out quick enough. And what you want to do is you want to get some glue onto the brush, spread it all around the base. And what this does is it's going to create your base so you can put all of your basing material on. Now the basing material that I use, I actually got from Joann's craft store. You actually can get them in bags of like little sand. You can also even go to the Dollar Tree or Dollar General or pound store, I guess, if you're in the UK. And they usually have like bags of, well, kind of almost like crystallized sand, and it works pretty well. So as you can see here, as soon as I'm finished applying all the glue onto the model, I have a little tin of the sand, and I'm going to dip it into it, and all the sand's just immediately going to stick to the glue. There we go. So it's not too fine and it's not too coarse. It actually creates a good texture, and it takes paint very, very well. So I just make sure you go on both sides. And then what I like to do is I like to press down into the glue and make sure it gets all seated in there. And then you'll find that there's rocks that are usually around the edge. Just gotta wipe those off. Make sure it's all going back into the tin. And that's just to help later on after you're priming, you don't have, you know, bits and pieces falling off the edge. It really makes it look nicer. And there you go. Alright, so here I have a model that is primed. Now this is using my sand method, and you can see how well this came out. The primer really locks in the sand after it's been glued, so it's really not going to be going anywhere. Now for this part, I'm going to be showing you guys how I base. Now, using the method I showed earlier with the dry brushing, I'm going to take some Zandri stone on a dry brush, and I'm going to dry brush it onto the sand area. Now, it's going to get on the model a little bit, but as you can see, I haven't painted the model, so I can just paint right over that. Typically, this is something that I do at the very end of my painting, but for this instructional purpose, I'm going to show you before. So I'm really making sure that I'm getting it all on the sand. And remember, the paint is still a little wet, so when it dries, it's actually going to be drying a little bit darker than when it shows here. So once I get all the basing done, I go back and I go get me some bleach bone, which is a much lighter, more of a khaki color paint, and I'm going to do the same thing. Only I'm not going to go over the entire model. I'm just going to go over most of it. So here we go. As you can see, it really picks up the color really, really well. And it's actually really quick to do this. Once your base coat is dry, you do this, and it's pretty quick. Next, as you can see, this is the model that we had watched earlier, and it's all good. All right, now this is a War Machine model, but you can see the grass and how the static grass is applied here. I'm going to show you how to do that next. Alright, so in this part I'm taking some glue, putting it onto the base. Now you don't want to put the entire base covered with glue, you just want to put it in small little spots. Just like this. Then, after you get done doing that, take some tweezers and static grass, and use the tweezers to pick up the static grass, otherwise it will get all over your fingers and you just gently put it onto the glue like so. Once you get all the glue spots covered with the static grass, then go ahead and turn it to the side and tap all the grass off like so. And then what I like to do is take it away from my work area, blow on it to get all the grass away from the model. And voila, there you go. Now once that dries, it's going to look really nice. And it's ready for a table. Alright, cool. Alright, so here we have a model from Hordes in War Machine. It's a Legion of Everblight model. Now you see how that arm had a hole and this part has a nub. They go together very well. But some models are not so easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn about pinning. Now this is a pin drill, or also as a pin vise. You can find these at most hobby stores, and I believe GW sells one, though I think theirs is a little bit expensive. What you want to do here is you want to find two parts that go together, like so, and you're going to use the pin drill vise to drill a little hole right in, like for in this instance, I'm going to drill a hole right there, okay? And it doesn't take long, especially being resin. It just kind of drills right through. Now make sure that you don't drill all the way through the model and end up poking yourself in the hand, because I've done that before and it hurts. You can tell it's working because you can see the little bits of resin starting to get starting to come out of there, and it gives you kind of a good indicator of how far down you're going. Now you can see where the hole is, and you can kind of gauge how deep it is. Now the next part to go from is to get yourself a paper clip. Now with this paper clip, I've actually cleaned it off a little bit. You want to take your clippers, and when you're clipping a piece off the paper clip, make sure that the point is actually pointing down towards like your mat, because otherwise that little piece of metal will go flying across the room, or worse, it will go like into you, like into your eye or something like that. So as you can see here, I'm going to point it down onto the mat and then just clip it off. Now for this instance, that little piece may be too long, but like I said, this is just for instructional purposes, where I'm just going to show you how to put it in. Now ideally you want to put a little bit of super glue into the hole, and then you just kind of slide it in like so. Now once it's in the hole and it's glued into place, one of the things you can do to help mark the spot where it needs to go is to take a little bit of paint and put a little bit of paint onto the tip of the paper clip. So when you hold it onto the next area where you're going to pin, it's going to mark the exact area where you need to pin it, like this. So here I'm just marking the little pin, hold it up to the model, and just lightly touch the area. I know it's probably going to be a little bit hard for you to see here, but right where my finger is, you can see a little tiny dot of paint. That is the perfect area to do the next part of your drilling. It's that simple. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for today on Cryptic Brush. This has been the Hobby Basics, and if this has helped you at all, or if you like this, do me a favor, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the little notification button, so that way you know when the new videos are coming out. And if you want, I also will, in the description below, will link my Instagram, the Facebook profile group that I'm part of, as well as my Patreon page that I have set up. Now I am still starting off on this, and I do plan on getting more videos out. But hey, if you guys help me out on Patreon, it would be amazing. It would really help me out to put forth better content, more models, more tutorials, all sorts of different things. And through my Patreon page, I'll actually have a Discord channel set up so we can chat during hobby Twitch live type things going on, all sorts of stuff. I have all sorts of stuff planned on So yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate it, and I hope you guys enjoy. Adios.